River Jude Bottom was born August 23, 1970, in Madras, Oregon, on a farm where parents John Lee Bottom and Arlen Duntz were employed. Arlen was born in the Bronx, New York, to Jewish parents whose family had emigrated from Russia and Hungary. John Lee was from Fontana, California, a Catholic of English, German, and French ancestry. In 1968, Arlen left home to travel across the United States. While hitchhiking in Northern California, she met John Lee. They married on September 13, 1969, less than a year after meeting. The couple lived what could be described as a bohemian lifestyle, which means they kind of lived an unconventional existence, often in the company of like-minded people with few permanent ties. The lifestyle usually involves musical, artistic, literary, or spiritual pursuits. They may be described as wanderers or adventurers or vagabonds. The term was first used to describe the non-traditional lifestyles of marginalized and impoverished artists, writers, journalists, musicians, and actors. They may be associated with unorthodox or anti-establishment political or social viewpoints, which are often expressed through free love, frugality, and in some cases, voluntary poverty. A more economically privileged, wealthy, or aristocratic bohemian circle is sometimes referred to as Haute Boheme, literally meaning high Bohemia. So the couple moved around often with their infant son. River's first name came from the River of Life in Hermann Hesse's book, Siddhartha. His middle name came from the Beatles song, Hey Jude. In 1972, John Lee and Arlen decided to take their lives in a whole new direction by joining the Children of God religious movement. Now known as Family International, it was a new religious movement that was founded in 1968 in Huntington Beach, California. It was originally called Teens for Christ, but later gained notoriety as the Children of God. Later on, it was reorganized as the Family of Love, which was eventually shortened to the Family. Now, it is currently called the Family International. So when John Lee and Arlen joined in 1972, it was called the Children of God. The members founded communes, first called colonies, now referred to as homes in various cities. They would evangelize in the streets and distribute pamphlets. Leaders within the Children of God were referred to as chains. New converts memorized Bible verses known as the set card. The set card contained over 300 Bible verses, as well as 10 chapters from the Bible. New members also took Bible classes and were expected to emulate the lives of early Christians and reject mainstream denominational Christianity. Most new members had to adopt new biblical names. The founder of the movement was David Berg, a former Christian and Missionary Alliance pastor. He communicated with his followers by writing letters. He published nearly 3,000 letters over a period of 24 years. In a letter written in January of 1972, Berg told his followers that he was God's prophet for the contemporary world in an attempt to further solidify his spiritual authority within the group. By 1972, the Children of God had 130 communities around the world. Street distribution of Berg's letters became the Children of God's main source of both outreach and monetary support for the next 5 years. The Children of God was abolished in February of 1978 amid reports of misconduct, financial mismanagement, and abuse of authority. During the time that John Lee and Arlen were involved with the Children of God, River became a big brother when the couple had a second child, Rain Joan of Arc, in 1972. As missionaries for the Children of God, the family lived in Texas, Mexico, Puerto Rico, and Venezuela. During this time, the family grew by 2 more, Joaquin Raphael, born in 1974, and Liberty Mariposa, born in 1976. The youngest child, Summer Joy, was born in 1978. As young children, the siblings learned to play musical instruments and to sing. River and Rain would perform on the streets of Venezuela to earn money and pass out literature for the children of God. John Lee and Arlen eventually became quite disillusioned with their religious group and decided to part ways with it around the same time that it was abolished in 1978. The family returned to the United States, where they settled down in Micanopy, Florida, a small suburb of Gainesville. The family found themselves living in poverty, and it became quite the desperate situation. The kids never really had any kind of formal education, but they all had a desire to read and write, and they had this intrinsic talent they were each born with. Being the two eldest, River would often play guitar, while his sister Rain sang on the street corners in order to raise money for the growing family. They soon began to attract attention for their musical and acting abilities. In an effort to pick themselves up from the breakdown of the religious group they had been in, realizing their children had the potential to make something out of themselves in the entertainment industry, John Lee and Arlen decided that not only did they need to move west to California if their kids were ever going to make it big in entertainment, they needed to completely reinvent themselves, starting with their name. Bottom just wasn't going to cut it. So they came up with Phoenix, as in rising from the ashes of their former existence. Thus was born River Phoenix. Not long after the now Phoenixes moved to California, top children's agent Iris Burton spotted River, Joaquin, Summer, Rain, and Liberty singing for spare change in the Westwood area of Los Angeles. She was so charmed by the family that she soon was representing the siblings. Arlen also managed to land herself a job as a secretary at NBC Studios. River started being casted in television commercials. He was featured in commercials for Mitsubishi, Ocean Spray, and Saks Fifth Avenue, and soon afterward, he and his siblings were signed by casting director Penny Marshall from Paramount Pictures. River and Rain were assigned immediately to a show called Real Kids as warm-up performers for the audience. In 1980, River began to fully pursue his work as an actor, making his debut appearance on TV on a show called Fantasy, where he sang with his sister Rain. In 1982, River was cast in the short-lived CBS television series 7 Brides for 7 Brothers, in which he starred as the youngest brother, Guthrie McFadden. River arrived at the auditions with his guitar and promptly burst into a pretty convincing Elvis Presley impersonation, which immediately charmed the show's producers. By the age of 12, River was also quite the accomplished tap dancer. 7 Brides for 7 Brothers only lasted for a year, ending in 1983. About a year later, River found a new role in the 1984 television movie Celebrity, where he played the part of young Jeffy Crawford. Although River's character was only on screen for about 10 minutes, his character was a central part of the movie. Less than a month after Celebrity, River starred in ABC after-school special Backwards, The Riddle of Dyslexia. River starred as a young boy who discovered he has dyslexia. Joaquin starred in a small role alongside his brother in the special. In September of 1984, River was cast in the pilot episode of the short-lived TV series It's Your Move in the role of Brian, but he only had one line of dialogue. He also starred as Robert Kennedy's son, Robert Kennedy Jr., in the TV movie Robert Kennedy and His Times. After his role in Dyslexia was critically acclaimed, River was immediately cast in a major role in his next made-for-TV movie, Surviving: A Family Crisis. He starred as Philip Brogan alongside Molly Ringwald and Heather O'Rourke. Halfway through the filming of this movie, he was contacted by his agent about a possible role in the film Explorers. This would be River's film debut in 1986, playing a young inventor with Ethan Hawke. His next film would become River's breakout role. He was cast in the 1986 film Stand By Me. Many of you, especially my fellow Gen Xers, have probably seen it, but in case you haven't, I'll give you a little background about the movie. Based on the Stephen King novella, The Body, and directed by Rob Reiner, Stand By Me is a coming-of-age story about 4 friends who decided to go see the body of a stranger they've heard that was accidentally killed near their rural home in Oregon. On the way, Gordy LaChance, played by Will Wheaton, Vern Tessio, played by Jerry O'Connell, Chris Chambers, played by River Phoenix, and Teddy Duchamp, played by Corey Feldman, encounter a mean junkman, a marsh full of leeches, and they learn more about one another and their unique home lives. What was meant to be just somewhat of an adventurous outing turns out to become a defining event in their lives. River earned rave reviews for his performance in the film as a young kid with a troubled home life in this film that would make River Phoenix a household name. Later that same year, River finished work on the film The Mosquito Coast, playing the son of Harrison Ford's character. The director of the film, Peter Weir, would say of River, "He was obviously going to be a movie star. It's something apart from acting ability. Laurence Olivier never had what River had." During the 5-month shoot in Belize, River became involved in a romantic relationship with his co-star, Martha Plimpton, a relationship that continued for many years. The film, however, was poorly received, but River remained confident with the reception of his work on Stand By Me. River was next cast in the leading role of the 1988 teen comedy drama A Night in the Life of Jimmy Reardon, but was somewhat disappointed with his performance. In an interview about the film, he would say that it didn't turn out the way that he thought it would, and he blamed himself. He wanted to do a comedy, and it was a stretch for him. He figured he wasn't the right person for the role. In 1988, River starred in Little Nikita alongside Sidney Poitier. So, all this time, while living in the Los Angeles area, River and his family found themselves having to move many, many times. Landlords didn't want to rent to families with so many young children. So River's parents would lie and say they only had 1 or 2 kids, and of course, eventually they would be found out and evicted. So finally, after completing his 6th feature film, 1988's Running on Empty, River was able to purchase his family a ranch near Gainesville, Florida, as well as some property in Costa Rica. In 1989, River was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, as well as a Golden Globe for his role in Running on Empty. He didn't win those, but he did receive the Best Supporting Actor honor from the National Board Review for that role. That same year, he played the role of a young Indiana Jones in the box office hit Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which was directed by Steven Spielberg. River also found himself gracing the pages of Vogue magazine and becoming a spokesperson for a Gap campaign. In 1991, River filmed the critically acclaimed independent movie Dogfight. In this romantic coming-of-age drama set in San Francisco, River played a young Marine on the night before he was set to leave for Vietnam in November of 1963. River struggled with this role because it was so radically different than who he actually was in real life. He was somewhat of a hippie, like his parents, and playing the role of a Marine was uncomfortable for him. It was around this time that he started drinking, and reportedly, he hadn't ventured into anything more than just drinking yet. He was also beginning to prepare for a role that would dramatically change his life. My Own Private Idaho. River met actor Keanu Reeves while he was filming Parenthood with River's brother Joaquin. River and Keanu starred together for the first time in 1990's I Love You to Death. The two would go on to star again together in Gus Van Sant's avant-garde film My Own Private Idaho, a role for which River was again acclaimed for his performance. In this adaptation of Shakespeare's Henry V, a very loose adaptation I might add, Mike Waters, played by River, is a gay, heroin-addicted hustler afflicted with narcolepsy. Scott Favor, played by Keanu, is the rebellious son of the mayor. Together, the two travel from Portland, Oregon to Idaho, and finally to the coast of Italy in a journey to find Mike's estranged mother. Along the way, they turn tricks for money, drugs, and eventually attract the attention of a wealthy benefactor and sexual deviant. For his role, River won the Best Actor honors at the Venice Film Festival, the National Society of Film Critics, and the Independent Spirit Awards. This movie and its success solidified River's image as an actor with edgy, leading man potential. The time during which River was filming My Own Private Idaho would mark the beginnings of his on-again, off-again relationship with drugs. I'll get more into River's experience filming My Own Private Idaho a little bit later. In 1992, River teamed up with Robert Redford and once again with Sidney Poitier for the conspiracy espionage thriller Sneakers. A month later, he began production on Sam Shepard's western Silent Tongue, released in 1994. But in a disappointing turn, River was beaten out for the role of Paul in A River Runs Through It by Brad Pitt. River made a cameo appearance in Gus Van Sant's Even Cowgirls Get the Blues in 1993, a film which co-starred his sister Rain. River then starred in Peter Bogdanovich's country music theme film The Thing Called Love in 1993, and he also began a relationship with co-star Samantha Mathis. This would be the last film that he would ever complete. Despite the fact that River's movie career was generating most of the income for his family, he was the breadwinner, and he took care of everyone in his family. Family and friends would say that music was truly what River was passionate about. River was a singer, songwriter, and quite the accomplished guitarist. He had begun teaching himself how to play guitar. I talked about it earlier that he and his sister Rain would perform on the streets for money. River would play guitar and Rain would sing. They had moved to Los Angeles when he was 9 so they could have a fighting chance at becoming recording artists. Commercials and acting roles came to him easily, and he went that direction for financial reasons. With some of the first money that he was able to earn from his film success, River saved $650 to buy a brand new guitar. While working on the film A Night in the Life of Jimmy Reardon in 1986, River wrote and recorded a song entitled Heart to Get, specifically for the ending credits of the movie. 20th Century Fox cut it from the film, however, but some years later the director put it back in its place for the director's cut version of the film. It was also during the time River was filming this movie that he met Chris Blackwell of Island Records. This meeting would later lead River to a 2-year development deal with the label, but River didn't like the idea of being a solo artist. He enjoyed the concept of collaboration. Therefore, he focused on putting a band together. So, River, along with his sister Rain, formed Aleka's Attic, an alternative folk rock band assembled out of Gainesville, Florida. When he wasn't acting or playing guitar, River was a dedicated animal rights, environmental, and political activist. He was a prominent spokesperson for the people for the ethical treatment of animals. If you look online, you can likely find some of his PSAs for PETA. He won their Humanitarian Award in 1992 for his work with the organization and his fundraising efforts. In 1990, for an Earth Day article in 17 magazine, River wrote an environmental essay that was targeted at his young fan base. At the end of the story, I will read the essay in its entirety for you. When I read it, it might not really sound like anything you haven't heard being told all the time now, but this was written more than 27 years ago. It's somewhat of a testament as to how forward River's mindset was back then. In addition to his work with PETA, He contributed financially to many environmental and humanitarian organizations. He purchased 800 acres of endangered rainforest in Costa Rica. He spoke at rallies on behalf of a variety of groups, and he and his band often played at charity events. In early October of 1993, River had just returned to the Los Angeles area from filming in Utah to finish a couple more weeks of interior filming in studio for the last project he had worked on, Dark Blood, a film that was actually finally completed in 2012. River struggled a great deal with the last few scenes that he had to film because it involved a love scene with a co-star that nobody on the set was getting along with very well. She apparently made his skin crawl. So by the time filming wrapped on the evening of October 30th, River was very stressed out and drained after the whole ordeal. He was ready to put all that behind him and enjoy a night out with his friends and family. His sister Rain and his brother Joaquin had flown out to join him at the then Hotel Nico, now the SLS Hotel on La Cienega Boulevard in West Hollywood. His girlfriend Samantha Mathis and a couple of other close friends also joined him. They were getting ready to perform with his good friend Flea, bassist of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, at the Viper Room, a Hollywood nightclub that was partially owned at the time by Johnny Depp. River had met Flea back in 1991 when he had a small part in My Own Private Idaho. The two became really good friends. River idolized Flea. What only close family and friends knew is River had spent the past 2 years struggling with an addiction to drugs, specifically cocaine and heroin. By the time he was filming Dark Blood, there was a noticeable change in River's personality and in his physical appearance, and people were noticing. As I said, the movie was draining and he did not cope well with it. He had kind of fallen back on his drug habits in order to cope with the ordeal, but he was staying sober enough to get through the work, using only in moderation. River struggled with filming Dark Blood, but he made it at least through the end of that night. River's drug habit found its beginnings while he was filming My Own Private Idaho. His agent didn't want him to take that role. She thought the director was way over the top with these types of films. He would be portraying the heroin-addicted gay street hustler I had described earlier, and she didn't think it was a right fit for his image. But River wanted the challenge. He wanted to do something different and more edgy than the roles that he had been accepting, so he took on the role, one which he would co-star with Keanu Reeves. River was determined to do this role justice, so he spent days on the streets of Portland hanging out with male street hustlers, and the drug element was very much a part of that scene. He didn't want to just make up a lifestyle of what the world was like. He wanted to live it and know what it was about, and he wanted that to be reflected in the film. The research aspect of every movie was a big deal for River. He and other cast and crew would bring some of the guys they'd find on the streets, bring them back to their hotel, and interview them about their daily life. And they'd film these interviews and go back and study them. While it fed River's curiosity, it was also a very difficult and painful process to know what these kids have had to go through in their lives. The movie would go on to be one of River's most critically acclaimed roles, if not the most critically acclaimed. The film has become a cult classic. It was during this time that River's venture into drug use began. It was just kind of the culture of the cast and crew and the environment that he was surrounded in during the time that he was filming My Own Private Idaho. River had dabbled in drug use prior to the film, but it had always been in moderation. The parties with the cast and crew carried on night after night after night. Many of the extras in the film were actual gay street hustlers from the Portland area. The track lines on their arms were real. very real, and River immersed himself deeply into his role as one of them. And as it would turn out, he immersed himself a little bit too much. He came away with a fierce addiction to heroin and cocaine that would plague him for the remainder of his life, especially during times of anxiety or stress. Drugs became his escape. So, on the evening of October 30th, after wrapping filming for Dark Blood for the day, which had caused him a great deal of anxiety, he was getting ready to head out with his sister Rain, brother Joaquin, and a couple of friends to the Viper Room. He was scheduled to perform a set with Flea, but at some point, Flea approached River at his booth at the club and told him that he wasn't going to have enough time for him to jam with him on stage. This was deeply disappointing for River, likely more disappointing than anybody was able to realize in that moment. River was upset that he wasn't going to be able to have the chance to be on stage with Flea, so he decided he was going to go look for some drugs instead. Apparently, hard drugs flow through nightclubs in Hollywood pretty freely. It's just another one of those things that can be added to my personal ever-growing list of things I don't know anything about. But hey, I'm learning. So, River excused himself from his family, his girlfriend, and his friends at the booth and went into the men's room to purchase some drugs. Whether or not they knew what his intentions were, I don't know. River had been relatively clean and sober for several months while filming Dark Blood, and it was not going well for him. He was frustrated and he was looking for a release. He's looking to relax, and not being able to get on stage with Flea was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. The only thing that he was looking for after that was to get loaded. While in the bathroom, River snorted a mixture of cocaine and heroin in powder form, also known as a speedball. The amounts of drugs that he ingested caused his system to react negatively almost immediately. People around him in the restroom could see that something was wrong, but did not right away take any action to call emergency services just yet. Someone apparently offered him something to help calm his system down. Witnesses thought it was a Valium, but later toxicology reports would identify diazepam, a sedative used to treat anxiety, muscle spasms, and seizures in his system, along with the cocaine and heroin. River's heart was beating out of control, likely misfiring, the cocaine causing it to race, and the heroin wanting it to slow down. He stumbled out of the bathroom and backed into the bar area. His body began to go into shock. The amounts of drugs that he snorted in the bathroom were massive, compounded by the fact that he hadn't been regularly using up to that point. His body simply wasn't used to the drugs, especially in the amounts that he had just taken. He made his way back to the table with his siblings, girlfriend, and friends. They could see that River wasn't feeling well, but they had no idea how badly the drugs were ravaging his internal organs at that moment. The medical examiner who conducted the toxicology tests would later describe the amounts of cocaine in his system as being astronomical, somewhere around 8 times what's considered lethal. Either River didn't realize the purity of the drug that he took and took the normal amount that he usually ingests, or he simply took way too much. The human body can only tolerate so much. He continued through cycles of vomiting, passing out, coming to, repeat. His family decided to take him outside to get some fresh air. As soon as he was outside, River fell to the sidewalk and began convulsing. Nobody standing around him knew what to do, or at least, if I were to speculate, they wanted to help him, but They didn't want to call for help. Being who he was, what was happening to him, the drugs that have been flowing around the club, nothing good was going to come of this. I'm assuming that they were worried about Rivers' image, his celebrity status, or if everyone there was worried about getting into some sort of trouble for the drugs, or if they hadn't realized the severity of what was going on. Something stopped them from getting the help that River was so desperately needing in that moment. Otherwise, I can't imagine why it took so long for someone to call 911. It would be more than 5 minutes after River went into convulsions on the sidewalk outside the Viper Room did his brother finally call 911. It took another 4 minutes for the ambulances to arrive at the scene. By this time, the seizures had stopped, and River's breathing became shallow. His heart was still beating very erratically, but pumping little to no blood at all at this point. By the time paramedics began to administer life-saving procedures, River was in full cardiac arrest. He was completely motionless. He was totally unresponsive. He had no pulse, and he was no longer breathing. Paramedics began CPR. They started an IV and gave him some drugs in an attempt to restart his heart. Unable to do so, they got him into an ambulance to transport him to the nearest emergency room. But it was too late. River was pronounced dead at 1:51 a.m. on October 31st, 1993. He was 23 years old. The following day, on the outside of the nightclub, fans and mourners set up a makeshift shrine on the sidewalk, leaving flowers, pictures, candles, and messages scrawled on the walls of the venue. A sign was placed in the window of the Viper Room that read, "With much respect and love to River and his family, the Viper Room is temporarily closed. Our heartfelt condolences to all of his family, friends, and loved ones. He will be missed." The Viper Room remained closed for 1 week. Johnny Depp continued to close the club every year on October 31st until he sold his share in 2004. Prior to his death, River's image, one that he didn't really care for, one that he openly criticized in interviews, had been a squeaky clean one, due in part to his strong dedication to the various social, political, humanitarian, and dietary interests that were not the most popular issues to align with at that time in the 80s. Therefore, the circumstances of his death, having been the result of an acute cocaine and heroin overdose, elicited a tremendous amount of media attention. On November 15, 1993, the media reported his autopsy results as stating, "Toxicology studies showed high concentrations of morphine and cocaine in the blood, as well as other substances in smaller concentrations. The cause of death was acute multiple drug intoxication, including cocaine and morphine." River's brother's call to 911, which had been recorded, was broadcasted by several radio and TV shows. A reporter broke into a Miami funeral home and took a picture of River resting in his casket, and that image was sold to the National Enquirer. As a result of all this, most of River's family remain, to this day, reclusive. Joaquin has also gone in and out of hiding over the years as well. On November 24th, 1993, River's mom, Arlen, published an open letter in the Los Angeles Times about the life and death of her son. It reads as follows: "I think people want to know if River ran his course or if he was taken from the world prematurely. River was my firstborn son. He introduced me to motherhood and has been the strongest influence on my life. I feel blessed to have been the woman who held him deep within my being as he grew from a tiny seed. I birthed him at home, suckled him to a chubby 2-year-old, and then held him in love and awe until his safe passage on October 31st. It was incredible to watch River grow. From the beginning, he was a soul filled with passion and a sense of service for others. At a young age, he took on the responsibility of sharing the wonderful gifts that were given to him. He diligently taught himself guitar at 4, sang on the streets of Venezuela to Westwood, California, and wrote music and lyrics, seeking to open hearts in a new way. Many of you have been able to experience his openness, gentleness, beauty, and vulnerability on the screen. He chose characters that reached inside the souls of the audience, awakening long-forgotten feelings. With River's passing, people the world over have been touched by the loss, and once again their deep feelings have surfaced. The coroner's report states that drugs were the cause of death. His friends, co-workers, and the rest of our family know that River was not a regular drug user. He lived at home in Florida with us and was almost never a part of the club scene in Los Angeles. He had just arrived in LA from the pristine beauty and quietness of Utah, where he was filming for 6 weeks. We feel that the excitement and energy of the Halloween nightclub and party scene were way beyond his usual experience and control. How many other beautiful young souls who remain anonymous to us have died by using drugs recreationally? It's my prayer that River's leaving in this way will focus the attention of the world on how painfully the spirits of his generation are being worn down. They are growing up with polluted air, toxic earth, toxic food, undrinkable water. We are destroying our forests, the ozone layer is being depleted, and AIDS and other diseases are an epidemic. The world is a very confusing place for most young people, and we need to address that. Drug abuse is a symptom of an unfeeling, materialistic, success-oriented world where the feelings and creativity of young people are not seen as important. Drugs, including alcohol, are used to soften the pain of feeling separated from ourselves, each other, and love. We just can't say no. It's ridiculous. We need to offer our children something that they can say yes to. I have been trying to make sense out of the chaos in relation to the world situation for many years, and with River's passing, I feel more clear than ever before. I feel the answer to our destructive nature, which manifests itself in many forms, and our inability to love and care for one another, is based on our disconnection from every natural part of who we are. The universe and Earth is a magnificent system of oceans, rivers, tributaries, and streams, of electrons, atoms, microorganisms, plants and animals, of plankton, moss, and trees, and we, the humans, believe we can stand apart from this living system and say that we are the masters. We act as if all of this was put here for us to use, abuse, and profit from. We have separated ourselves from the very essence of life in order to raise ourselves up as the ultimate divine expression on earth. River made such a big impression during his life on earth. He found his voice and found his place. And even River, who had the whole world at his fingertips to listen, felt deep frustration that no one heard. What's it going to take? Chernobyl wasn't enough. Exxon Valdez wasn't enough. A bloody war over oil wasn't enough. If River's passing opens our global heart, then I say thanks, dear beloved son, for yet another gift to us all. River was cremated and his ashes were scattered at his family ranch in Florida. And River's band, Alika's Attic, disbanded, never having released the album they completed together. I've enjoyed so much reminiscing with you about River's life and his movie career. I really hadn't thought about him in quite some time until I decided to tell his story as the anniversary of his death falls on Halloween. I have thought about him on those occasions that I have driven past the Viper Room. I think about him on that sidewalk and his life slipping away. He was a heartthrob when I was young. He was so adorable. And the last movie that I saw him in theaters, My Own Private Idaho, was kind of a shock to see him in that type of a role. And then he was gone. And with that, I want to thank you so much for joining me for this bonus Halloween episode, The Tale of River Jude. Stick around after the end of the show and I will read River's essay. And until next time, sweet dreams. April 1990. We Are the World by River Phoenix. Heavens mourn above us until dawn. Weeping see her tears as rain they fall. Winds whip through canyons, manifesting splintered wrath. Mother knows that we've betrayed her, dealing with the aftermath. Sailing ocean, cross the sea, floating vessel carries me. Once I'm there, what is it worth if I'm betraying Mother? Stormy weather abruptly changes my course suddenly. It's so unfair, starting at birth, still mistreating Mother Earth. So you see, my friends, what we have done. Shadows linger overhead, heavy like the fog in valleys. Under heavy earth lay dead. In a boxcar hides an orphan, seeking shelter, nothing more. Gliding now, tracks lie before him, leading him to distant shore. These are lyrics from a song called Betraying Mother. This year, 1990, the year I leave my teenage years behind, I realize nothing else matters but this. We must heal our planet if we're to survive. Because my parents are so closely connected with nature and share the reality that planet Earth is our home, I have always been conscious of that. We need to care for the earth as the living, breathing, supporting, feeding, nurturing home it is for us. As a young person, there were always other threats that seemed much greater to me along the way. Nuclear war, the many hand-to-hand wars all over the planet, famine, poverty, crime, drugs, political prisoners, and an overall lack of compassion for every living thing. And closer to home, each of us has our own struggles with growing up. There's a lot packed into our teenage years. We go from childhood into a time when hormones start taking over. It all seems to come at us so fast. We are developing physically and taking on much more responsibility at home. We're dealing with our school workload, peer pressure, the continual, what are you going to be when you grow up question, trying to set a good example for siblings, choosing a college, and the million of other things on our minds that have really little or nothing to do with our relationship to Mother Earth and our true nature as human beings who have taken it upon ourselves to be in charge of the planet. With so much going on, it was quite a relief to think that our elected officials would take care of all of those major planetary concerns while we're just able to concentrate on growing up. It's obvious now that not only was no one taking care of our home as we trusted, but that people were, and still are, perpetuating this planetary destruction. Now as I look ahead to my future, I'm amazed at how the Earth itself is letting us know in so many ways that there has been a gross injustice done by humankind. The many recent devastating floods, landslides, and weather changes show the Earth's pain, how out of the balance our ecosystem has become. At this point, not only have we polluted the Earth we live on, the waters we drink and swim in, and the air we breathe, but we have even altered the atmosphere itself. We are now in a global emergency, and for this reason, I am most thankful for Earth Day 1990, which will hopefully mobilize a world massive citizen army to avert planetary disaster. There are solutions to these problems, but most of them will take a conscious effort by every human being to eliminate from his or her life the things that are leading us to impending disaster. I list the following problems, and I ask you to join me and become a part of the solution. The greenhouse effect. Gases get trapped in the atmosphere, which acts like a glass of a greenhouse, letting in sunlight, but not letting all of the reflected infrared heat out. Because our forests and oceans can't filter out all of the carbon dioxide we spew into the atmosphere from power plants, large-scale burning, and cars, it gets trapped and starts to put pressure on the planet. We must use less energy, less electricity, and reduce the burning of fossil fuels, mostly coal and oil. We really need to improve gas mileage for cars. We must make transportation from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources like solar power that do not contribute to global warming. We must plant more trees because they are nature's storehouses of carbon dioxide. The ozone layer. The ozone layer is 7 miles up in the atmosphere and is a shield from the ultraviolet rays of the sun. This delicate membrane is being destroyed by man-made chemicals that drift up there, mainly CFCs that are used in air conditioners, refrigerators, styrofoam, and industrial solvents. These CFCs eat away at the ozone and also contribute to the greenhouse effect. We need to work for laws that will ban CFCs. That's the key. We can't wait for everyone else to do it. You change the world by changing yourself. Rainforest destruction. 49 million acres of rainforest are destroyed or degraded each year. That's equivalent to 1.5 football fields every second. These forests are vital sources of oxygen. They moderate our climate, prevent floods. They are our best defense against soil erosion. Forests recycle and purify our water. 1/4 of all prescribed medication in the United States is derived from raw materials found in the forests. They are home to millions of plants and animals. The beauty and inspiration of these forests are important to millions of people. Rainforest destruction contributes to the greenhouse effect because there is no way to replant these jewels of nature fast enough to soak up the exorbitant amount of carbon dioxide they release into the Earth's atmosphere when they're burned. One force behind the destruction of the rainforest is our country's importation of millions of pounds of meat annually from Central America. To provide pasture for cattle, these countries have been burning and clearing their priceless rainforests. We must make our outrage known to the businesses that use this meat. We must demand that they stop contributing to the destruction of the rainforest. One reason our Central and South American neighbors have participated in this destruction is because of the tremendous debt they have to countries all over the world. By exporting meat, they make some of the money they need to pay back these debts. I say we should figure out a way to forgive them and their debts so we may all live. It's a tragedy that 1,000 plant and animal species become extinct each year due to the destruction of tropical rainforests, and that the native rainforest tribes are being forced out. As the rainforests disappear, many of our migratory birds are losing their winter homes. They're dying, and this is harmful because they naturally control the population of insects, and tragic because their beauty will be lost to the world. Garbage. We have run out of room for all of the garbage our throwaway society has created. We must implement recycling programs in our homes, schools, and communities. You can start by recycling aluminum, glass, newspaper, cardboard, and paper. Talk to your teachers and call your elected officials to find out how you can get involved. Buy products that come in recyclable containers. Be persistent. Be enthusiastic. Be determined. Chemical, toxins, and pesticides. We are literally poisoning ourselves because of the pesticides sprayed on our produce, the chemicals dumped on our farmlands to nourish the soil, the hormones, growth stimulants, tranquilizers, and antibiotics fed to animals that humans eat, and of course, the pollutants spewed into the air. Pesticides don't just affect the creature who ingests them first. They accumulate in the tissues of animals, and then, as one organism is eaten by another, they build up in even higher concentrations. This means that a worm living in the soil will store pesticides in its tissue. Then a bird will eat the worm and ingest the pesticide eaten by the worm. And then tens of thousands of other worms it ingests in its lifetime. At each stage up the food chain, the concentration of toxic chemicals is greatly increased. The same is true of cows or chickens or pigs. Animals raised on factory farms build up especially high concentrations of chemical toxins because they're fed great quantities of fish meal made from fish swimming in polluted waters. Their other feeds are grown on land heavily sprayed with pesticides. They are dipped in, sprayed with, and intentionally fed many toxic compounds to keep them quote-unquote healthy while living in filthy and unnatural conditions inside these factory farms. The days of livestock animals grazing together in lush green meadows are over. These poisons are retained in the fat of animals. Each step up the food chain, animals become ever more concentrated carriers of the most deadly chemicals. You sit at the very top of the food chain, and whenever you eat anything that comes from nature, you are ingesting these toxins too. The solution to these problems will take time, but they will be accomplished. I've learned that if you can't get it all together to accomplish this thing called peace, you do at least your part in your own life, because that's where you can truly make an immediate difference. I'd like to stop all of the world wars, but that's really an impossible endeavor for one person. But I can stop all the wars in my life. I can start with myself and improve my personal relationships with everyone I'm in contact with. I'd like to stop world hunger and famine, but one man single-handedly couldn't possibly stop everyone's hunger. What I can do is spend my own time, energy, and money enlightening others about the plight of the poor. And although I can't stop all cruelty to living creatures on the planet, I can be kinder to every living creature in my life. Peace begins with you, now. We must light the lamp of our consciousness so that we never react without thinking and questioning the means to get to the end that we are seeking. Because if the path along the way is covered with thorns, selfishness, cruelty, and greed, you can be pretty sure that the result will lead us to just about where we are today, near the end, if we don't do something quickly. Therefore, I question everything with my consciousness lamp on to see if the road I take along the way will lead me to peace. In my life, I decided to not eat meat or animal products or to use their skins for my clothing, shoes, or decorations. There's such immense cruelty involved with raising of animals for human consumption that if I can stop their pain by boycotting their products, I will immediately make a difference. To recycle. Also, to question my habits of consumption. I try to use less of everything and reuse things whenever I can. To speak out and know that my voice can be heard by writing government officials, becoming politically active, lobbying in Washington, and becoming a part of peaceful educational demonstrations. To use less and less of those things that add to the demise of our planet. In our family, we were never big for celebrating holidays, but this year my mother is asking for something on Mother's Day for the first time. She wants us to help her call attention to the world that this Mother's Day of 1990 should be dedicated to the most nurturing mother of all, Mother Earth. If gifts are given on this day, let all mothers request that their gifts be to the earth. We could plant trees, make donations to environmental groups, or give other gifts to promote understanding of the condition of the planet. This would truly make a day worth celebrating. With the help of all of you, I look forward to the years ahead of us when our generation can work together to create a happy, healthy, clean, and loving environment.
Well, hello, my friends. This is CK from the Mirths and Monsters podcast, proud partner of the Odd Audio Network. Join me, my companion Finn, and my occasionally satanically possessed cat Ray as we investigate the real truths behind some of the most wonderful creatures you can imagine. Are trolls really that thick? Or is it just bad press? Are leprechauns really drunken bums? Sort of. But there's a lot more to find out. All you need to do is tune in to Mirths and Monsters podcast with me and Finn. Till next time, sláinte, your good health.